Embracing limitation. Some rambling thoughts about the way you were made. Time is flying by. It feels like it was just New Year's Eve just a couple of weeks ago, when in fact we're already in the first week of February. I kicked off 2026 by receiving a parking fine, which threw me into an appeals process right before I had a chance to find my bearings. I wasn't parked anywhere illegal. In fact, quite the opposite. I was given a fine by a CPM patrol because I had parked in my own assigned car parking space directly outside my own house, with a valid CPM parking permit clearly displayed in the front windscreen. Upon appeal, they have dropped the fine, but this sort of thing is extremely frustrating. It eats up your mental bandwidth. I was chatting with my wife earlier on, and she said that she doesn't think we're designed to handle the amount of interactions we have in the modern world, like being constantly contactable by phone every waking hour of the day. I agree. It eats up your mental bandwidth. This is not a new thought. Lots of people have said the same thing, but it is a thought that lots of us have, and then proceed to do nothing about. The news cycle tells us of things happening far outside our small worlds, and yet we're expected to care and demand change or feel outraged. Phrases like, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention, and silence is violence are aimed at forcing you to speak on topics you know nothing about. You become a puppet for whichever cause told you the news. They ventriloquise their message through you, the willing participant. At some point, we all need to recognise that it's okay to sit this one out, or, as James puts it, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Culture tells you to speak up, have an opinion, make your voice heard, don't sit this one out. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. James tells us the opposite. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. For those of you that don't know, I have two brothers, both older than me. Matt now lives in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Adam lives in Australia. I still live in the town I grew up in the south of England. I mentioned my brothers for a good reason. Each of them in their own way are much cleverer than I am. Both of them are gifted musicians and songwriters. Both of them are very visually gifted too, Matt in graphic design sense, and Adam in a drawing and painting sense. However, for the sake of today's post, probably one of the qualities I would like to note is that they both live at a slower pace of life than I do. They have consciously or unconsciously adopted the pace of life in their new homes, both of which are less fast-paced than here in the UK. I say this with no judgment. I'd like to be able to emulate this in my own life. I know it would do me some good. Adam doesn't write much on Substack, but he did write very well about rest as humility last year. I'd encourage you to have a read, but here's a little taster of what you can expect from him. Quote, rest is ultimately an act of humility. It acknowledges dependence. It says I am the recipient, not the source. It says I plant, another waters, and while I sleep, the seeds grow. And it is God, not me, who gives the increase. Adam Hellier, rest as humility. I like how Adam draws our attention to the fact that we should embrace our limitations and rest, rather than pretending the whole world revolves around us and may somehow stop spinning if we stop our invaluable work. Nope, not true. We can only say that of God, not us. Matt has registered a Substack, but hasn't written anything yet, despite my best efforts to encourage him. But he has an enormous back catalogue of YouTube videos. In this week's episode, he was celebrating reaching 500 weekly vlogs that he and his wife Rowan have made. That's remarkable. I had a bit of a video chat with him about it this week, and touched on the topic of limitation in our discussion. We're only human. We can only do so much. It's okay to admit that. The only person to whom this is news is ourselves. God is already well aware. So, what do I mean by embracing limitation exactly? Have you ever noticed that God made you and me with a built-in mechanism to keep us humble? It's called sleep. If you don't literally stop everything and admit the world doesn't revolve around you every day, you will break. You stop working properly when you refuse to stop working. Don't for 1 second think I'm anti-work. Hope we established 3 weeks ago that I'm very much in favour of work. It's just that I think God's design for you is to be limited, not limitless. Technology in the digital age wants you to think that everything is possible and that every limitation should be cast off. But clearly God doesn't think like that. He makes you surrender to sleep every day. In fact, when you think about it, God himself is the least limited being in the entire universe, yet he makes a habit out of limiting himself voluntarily. In Genesis, God created the world in 6 days, then rests. He didn't need to, he chose to. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. He is the source of all life. He is the creator of all things, and yet he rests. This is not the behaviour of a God who is sat on the edge of his heavenly throne, frantically pressing buttons and twisting dials to keep everything on track. Nope, he acts and rests with the confidence and assurance of one who can see the end from the beginning, a position that only he holds. Amazing. And it's not the only time he has embraced limitation. We know that he cannot lie. God is not a human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Numbers 23, verse 19. This is another way of saying that God cannot deny who he is. He is the truth, therefore he cannot lie. You can see here how Paul is celebrating this fact when he writes to Timothy. If we are unfaithful, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny who he is. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13. God voluntarily limiting himself is an idea that makes some folks uncomfortable, and that's okay. Some Calvinists don't like the idea, as it can seem like it steps on the toes of the absolute sovereignty of God. But I don't see it that way. In the Incarnation, when Jesus embraced the limitation of human flesh, Jesus voluntarily chose to restrain his divine attributes. He did not relinquish them. As in the words of the old song, "You laid aside your majesty, gave up everything for me, suffered at the hands of those you had created." The majesty was laid aside, not lost. Perhaps a more pressing detail is that God also limits himself in the sense that he chooses to work through us, his people. He spoke through the stuttering Moses. He led through Gideon, who was hiding, and spread faith through doubters like Thomas. We are his hands and feet. It is his good pleasure to work in the world through you and me today. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Philippians chapter 2, verse 13. I can't do it all. I'm not made to do it all. But God has made me to work with him and for him. Anything I need to cut back or to cut out are only the things I've tried to squeeze in the first place. I don't think the good Lord cares if I stay up to date with all the comings and goings of current affairs. I don't think it's a sin not to be on top of the 24-hour news cycle, even when it includes massive stories like the Epstein files, civil war in Iran, or ICE deportations. These things will still happen, whether or not I'm emotionally invested in them. However, I absolutely do need to love my neighbour. There's no escape clause from that one. So that's what thoughts were taking a stroll in my mind this week. Thanks for joining me on this ramble. If you think you know someone else who might appreciate this collection of thoughts, why not share it with them? And do please check out my brother's Substacks if you have a moment. Thanks again for joining me today. I hope you can join me for another ramble again soon. Grace and peace.